Please welcome to the stage Vin Brue.
So I'm not someone who likes to brag about how I was into something before it was cool, but I was definitely into comic books and superheroes before it was cool. And I'm not sure it's even cool now or ever will be, so I'm totally not bragging. But they're certainly more mainstream now with all these big movies and TV shows and the whole nerd culture that exists at the moment. When I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, there was no nerd culture. If you were into comic books, you were just a nerd and you were picked on and made fun of constantly. Especially when you got to high school and everyone's moving on to like parties and sex and drinking, and you're still wearing your Wolverine underpants, you know? And I went to this very competitive all boys prep school where everyone wanted to be like a banker or a doctor or a lawyer. And I was like, I want to be Batman, you know? So everyone thought I was completely insane. There was actually a rumor on the bus after school that my brother had put LSD in my cereal when I was a child, and that's why I was the way that I was. And I was always like, no, he didn't. Shut up. And I would lock myself in my bedroom and cry myself to sleep at night under a blanket of comic books, because that's where the good guys stuck up for kids like me, you know. And that's why I was very, very lonely. And so I started reaching out to the only people who I figured were as into comic books as I was, and that's the people who were making them. And my favorite comic book creator at the time was this guy named Max Fallis, who was like the hip young rebel rock star of the comic book world. He had just founded his own new company called Pagan Studios, and I loved all these new characters. And he was also, he starred in this commercial that was airing for a while, where he was in his studio being interviewed by this really hip film director. And I was like, you see, guys, I told you it's on TV. Comics are cool, right, guys? Guys, where's everybody going? Still not cool. But that commercial changed my life because in it, he said something like his parents were never on board with his career choice until they found out he could make a lot of money doing it. And that blew my mind because in my spare time, I was always coming up with my own superheroes and characters and living in my own fantasy world. And it had never occurred to me that you could make a living doing this. So when I realized that you could be successful and not have to be a banker or a doctor or a lawyer, I was like, this is what I'm doing with my life. And what started as a hobby quickly became a very serious obsession. And I started sending letters every day to all of my favorite comic book companies, just sending in my story ideas and character ideas and asking them a million questions, how they broke into the industry, what types of pens and pencils they used. And in the back of comic books, there's usually a couple pages where they publish fan letters. And I really wanted to get in there. And I've been writing letters every day for months and never had any luck. And I was getting pretty discouraged. And then one day I flipped open the back of one of my favorite comics. And there, staring me in the face, was my letter and my name. And I was like, holy shit, I fucking finally did it, you know? And I wanted to shout this great news from the mountaintops. But at the same time, I did not want anyone to find out about this because seeing my name, Vin Brue, in print, I was like, I don't want to be associated with that guy. He's kind of a loser. And I was also afraid if anyone from high school found out about this, that the wedgies would never end. And I was tired of wedgies. So that's when I came up. I was like, I was going to create an alter ego for myself who I could not only hide behind, but who would be the hero that I didn't think Vin Brue was ever going to be. And that's when I came up with the brilliant idea for Idea Boy. That's right. Great idea number one right there, batting 1,000. My second great idea was I would take a Sharpie and I would black out all my envelopes except for where the addresses and the stamp would go. So that in the sea of white envelopes I imagined all the other fans sending in, my black envelope would stand out and they'd be like, who's this genius Idea Boy? We got to read this one. And as crazy as it sounded, it worked because Idea Boy's letters started getting published in the back of all of these comic books, like week after week. And everyone was like, who's this mysterious Idea Boy? And soon, one of the editors at Pagan Studios started writing back to me at my house. Like we were like pen pals. And this other guy who was an assistant started calling me long distance from the studio in California to talk shop with me. I was a 15-year-old kid living in New Jersey. This guy's making a long distance phone call to my house. And it was very encouraging to me. And my mom took note of this. She was always very supportive of my endeavors. And so for my 16th birthday, she got me the best present ever, which was a trip to the San Diego Comic Con, the biggest, yes, comic book event of the year. And I was so excited I was going to finally be amongst my fellow nerds in California, and I was going to get to meet all these guys that I worshiped and adored in person finally. And so we flew out there, and Saturday morning I wake up and I run right to the convention and immediately go right to the Pagan Studios booth where all my favorite artists and writers are set up, giving out autographs and sketches and stuff. And I got really nervous because I hadn't actually told any of these people that I was coming out there. Because as successful as Idea Boy was, I was still very nervous and awkward and shy, and I didn't want them to meet me and be like, "Oh, you're Idea Boy? Oh, that's disappointing." I didn't want there to be this pressure on me, so I wasn't sure if I was even going to tell anybody. But then I got to the front of the line, and one of the artists was like, "Hey, what's your name, kid?" And I was like, Idea Boy." He was like, "Holy, like the Idea Boy? Oh shit, everybody get over here. You got to meet Idea Boy." And all these guys who I was waiting in line to get autographs from, like, rushed over to greet me like I was their hero, like I was this celebrity. I was like, this is the most surreal moment of my life. And they were like, "What are you doing for lunch? Can we take you out for lunch?" And I was like, "Yeah, let me just check my, yes, what is happening right now? This is crazy." And these guys took me out to lunch, and they basically offered me a job. I mean, again, I was 16, living in New Jersey with my parents at the time, but they were like, "When you're old enough, we'd love to put you to work at the studio. Like, you got a lot of great ideas, as an Idea Boy should, and you got a lot of passion." And, they wanted to, like, groom me to be this future star of the industry. And it was the first time I ever felt proud of myself in my life. Like, these guys who I admired recognized some talent in me, and my hard work had made that happen. And so I felt good about myself for the first time ever, and it was an incredible day. There was just one thing missing, and that was that Max Fallis, my idol, was supposed to be at the convention, but he had to cancel his appearance because he was behind on a deadline, as always. And I was kind of bummed, but I really didn't care because I was on cloud nine at the time. But as lunch was wrapping up, he was like, one of the guys was like, "Hey, if you can get up to our studio tomorrow, we would love to meet you there when we wrap up here. We'll give you a tour of the place. You'll get to meet Max. What do you say?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, this is the icing on the cherry on top of the cake. Like, all my dreams are coming true." So the next day, my mom and I take the train ride up there. It was like a 2-hour train ride to where the studio was. And it was located in this little like corporate office plaza. And we get in, and there's a security guard at the front. We tell him we're there for a tour. And he was like, "Yeah, whatever, go on up." So we go on up to the studio, and it's very quiet. It's a Sunday afternoon. There's nobody at the reception desk. So my mom and I just have a seat and just looking around. There's this white light just flooding out from the studio, like, oh, like this is where the magic happens. This is where my favorite artists and writers create my favorite characters. And where I'm now thinking I'm going to be spending my future creating superheroes that will inspire generations of future dorks like me. And then suddenly, from out of the white light, like a god emerging from a heavenly cocoon, stepped Max Fallis himself in the flesh, walking towards us. And I was like, "Holy shit," my heart started pounding. I was like, "They must have told him Idea Boy's here. He's coming out to personally, greet me and welcome me into the fold." So I got up all excited and I extended my hand for him to shake. And he went fucking ballistic. "Who the fuck are you people? Who let you up here? You're trespassing on private property. Get the fuck out of here right now." This was not the welcome wagon I was expecting. And like I was about to be like, "It's really great to meet you," but that would have been a lie because it was terrifying. It was like he had transformed into one of his own supervillains in front of my eyes, with his mouth agape and veins bulging out of his neck. And I was this weird mix of like starstruck and terrified, and I didn't know what to do, just paralyzed. So I was like, "Ah." Thankfully, my mom spoke up. I was like, "Excuse me, like, we came all the way from New Jersey. My son is a huge fan of yours, and these guys from your company said that we could have a tour." And he was like, "Bullshit! Everyone's still at the convention. Like, you guys are trespassing. If you don't get the fuck out of here right now, I'm calling the cops and having you arrested." Like, it was insane. I have no idea to this day why he was that angry. Like, I don't know if he had a mountain of cocaine and a bunch of hookers in the other room, but like, he wanted us to get out of there now. So we ran back to the elevator and went downstairs, and I was like physically trembling from LSD encounter, and I was still holding out hope. Like, these guys are going to show up. They're going to talk to him. We're going to have a big laugh about this someday. Nothing's fucked here, you know. But at the same time, I knew that it was totally fucked because in my heart, I knew that this spell I had been under for so many years was broken, and this fantasy world that I had taken refuge in for so long from the bullies and the cruelty of the outside world had been irreparably breached by this guy who I thought was my hero and who I wanted to be like for so many years, and who I gave so much of my time and creativity and money to, and turned out to be such a huge dick. And so I knew there was no going back, but we still waited for like another hour. And then we had to get home, and I just straight up ugly cried the entire way back to New Jersey. And I never read another comic book in my life after that. Yeah, well, I stopped believing in heroes that day. And as sad as that is, I never stopped believing in myself, though, because I knew that thank you, whatever success Idea Boy had, I knew that, like, that was me. Like, I was the idea boy behind Idea Boy. And that stayed with me. And I was also just less afraid of the real world because, like, that experience was so traumatic that it made the everyday bullying of high school seem really trivial. Like, I heard that old rumor on the bus one day, and I was like, you know what, guys? My brother did put LSD in my cereal, and I am tripping fucking balls right now. You guys see that gorilla chasing after the bus? Oh, my God, he's going to get us. Ah! And all these kids started laughing. They were like, keep going, tell us more, you know? So every day after school, I would hold court with these kids, you know, just to a rapt audience of my former bullies. And I realized that I could just redirect that creativity and passion into other things. And I kept writing and got into NYU for film and started writing more stories and making little videos. And I started teaching myself different instruments. I started a band and started living in reality for the first time in my life. And as a result of that, I've made some of the most incredible, wonderful friends who I love dearly and collaborators. I met my amazing wife. And I'm happy to say that I'm no longer that lonely kid crying into his comic books every night, which is why, as much as I would love to see him tied up and slowly dipped into a vat of boiling water, I would like to say thank you to Max for that experience and who it forced me to become. And sometimes I wonder how my life would be different had things gone differently that day. But my least favorite comic book when I was growing up was called What If? And it was always like, what if Peter Parker hadn't been bitten by a radioactive spider? I'm like, who gives a shit? He wouldn't have been Spider-Man, you know? So I feel like in some ways, Idea Boy needed to die so that Vin Brue could live. And now I go to parties and people are like, have you seen the new Avengers? And I'm like, nope. And they're like, you fucking loser. And then they give me wedgies. So I can't win. My ass is killing me, so I'm going to go see a proctologist. You guys have been great. Thanks for listening to my story.